Welcome to all of you, Shiksha 360, and today basically we will discuss legal chapter number 2, part 2. So, chapter number 2 is control over organization of banks. Clear? So, in this session, basically we have to discuss basically different types of capital. Different types of capital, like what is share capital, what is authorized capital. Clear? All these things basically we have to discuss one by one now. So first of all, basically we have to discuss the paid up capital and reserves. Clear? First of all, basically we have to discuss the paid up capital and reserves. Very, very important for the examination point of view. As we know that basically there is some minimum capital requirement. Clear? Basically there is some minimum capital requirement. So section 11 of the Banking Regulation Act. Clear? Section 11 of the Banking Regulation Act provides for certain minimum requirements. Clear? Sorry. Sorry. Section 11 of the Banking Regulation Act basically provides for certain minimum requirements basically as to the paid up capital and the reserves of the banking company. Clear? And the reserves of the banking company, which we have to also discuss as per the book, basically what they are mentioning. Clear? So any company basically wanting to commence business, or we can say that basically wanting to start banking business. Clear? Any company wanting to start or commence banking business has to comply basically with these requirements. Clear? Has to comply basically with these requirements, and the amount stipulated have reference to the places of the business. Clear? Basically what minimum capital you have requirement. Clear? Basically what is the minimum capital basically you have to be requirement, that is basically with the reference to the place of the business. Okay, so what is the meaning of the place of business, which we have already discussed? Place of business basically for this purpose means any office, sub office, sub-pay office, and any place. Clear? Place for business basically for this purpose means any office, sub office, sub-pay office, and any place at which the deposits are received, checks are encashed, or money is lent. Clear? Any place basically at which the deposits are received, checks are encashed, and money lent. Clear? Or money lent. Clear? Or money lent. Clear? So this is basically means to the place of the business. And under which section basically they have to provide minimum capital or minimum requirements basically for the paid up capital reserve, that is section 11. Now next one basically what is the requirement basically for the foreign banks, and here basically there are one or two important points I will tell you which you have to remember. Clear? For the examination point of view. Clear? So under the subsection 2 of section 11, clear, under the subsection 2 of section 11 of the Banking Regulation Act, a foreign bank that is basically banking company incorporated outside India. Clear? A foreign bank basically which is that a banking company basically incorporated outside India, but that is operating in the India. Clear? Like we can say that we will take the example of the Citibank. Okay, so basically, so under the subsection 2 of section 11 of the Banking Regulation Act, a foreign bank that is basically banking company incorporated outside India, operating in the India, has to deposit and keep deposit basically with the Reserve Bank an amount of rupees 15 lakh. Clear? Just basically figures, not that much important for the examination point of view. Just go through that. Clear? How much basically amount basically they have to deposit, that is rupees 15 lakh if they basically want to work operate in India. Clear? And further, if they have to place of business either in the Mumbai or in the Kolkata, clear, or both, then how much amount basically they have to deposit, that is rupees 20 lakh. Clear? That is 20 lakh. Clear? Basically generally at any place in India, that is rupees 15 lakh, and along with that, if it is a place of business basically either in the Mumbai or Kolkata or both, then it is basically amount is becomes 20 lakh. Clear? Then the amount becomes 20 lakh. Further, the amount has to be kept in the cash. Clear? This much amount basically either basically they have to be deposited basically with the RBI either in the form of the cash. Very, very important. Clear? Basically amount is to be kept in which form? Clear? First one is basically either in the form of cash. Second one is the unencumbered approved securities. Clear? Unencumbered approved securities. Clear? So what is the meaning of unencumbered here? Clear? So what is the meaning of unencumbered here? Unencumbered basically means that basically these are basically those securities. Clear? That are basically those securities in which there is no liability. Clear? Unencumbered basically means securities where liability is zero. Clear? Basically, where liability is a zero. Clear? Securities basically where liability is zero. Clear? So the amount has to be kept in the cash or unencumbered approved securities or partially in both. Clear? Apart from this, clear? Basically, apart from this, very, very important, another 0.5 mark question. Apart from this, basically an amount of 20%. Clear? How much amount? Basically, that is 20% of what? That is of the profit. An amount of 20% of the profit for each year. Clear? 20% of what? Basically of profit of for each year, basically in respect of business transacted through the branches in India as disclosed in the profit and loss account. Clear? Generally, basically you will see that basically PL account has to be deposited with the Reserve Bank. Clear? Has to be deposited with the Reserve Bank. Clear? Like we can say that if they are showing basically 200 crore profit, clear, 200 crore profit. So basically how much amount basically they have to deposit with that? That is 20% of 200. That is 40 crore. Clear? That is 40 crore. Basically, they have to deposit with the RBI. Clear? Basically, they have to deposit basically with the RBI. Clear? So this one is the thing. Basically, they want to say that. So this is regarding the foreign banks. Clear? This is regarding the foreign banks. Now move to the next one. That is basically with respect to the Indian banks. Clear? Now move to the next point. That is basically related with respect to the Indian banks. So how much basically they have to maintain? So in the case of banking companies, basically incorporated in India, the requirements of minimum paid up capital and reserves under section 11.3 as follows. Clear? Basically, please remember this one. Clear? That is the minimum paid up capital that is basically under section 11. But it further basically for the foreign banks that is section 11.2 and for the Indian banks that is section 11.3. Clear? Requirements of minimum paid up capital and reserves under section 11.3 are as follows. Clear? First one is if it has a place of business. Clear? Basically, if it has a place of business basically in more than one state. Clear? If it has a place of business basically in more than one state, then basically how much amount basically they have to deposit with the RBI? 5 lakh. And if such places of business basically include Mumbai, Kolkata or both, then the amount is to be rupees 10 lakh. Clear? Then the amount is to be rupees 10 lakh. If along with that the places basically will include, we can say that like Mumbai, Kolkata or both. Clear? Mumbai, Kolkata or both. Then the amount it is little bit more, that is rupees 10 lakh. Clear? That is rupees 10 lakh. Clear? So please remember both these things for the examination point of view. Now basically we have to discuss here, that is basically we are discussing here paid up capital. Clear? So what is the meaning of the paid up capital here? Clear? What is the meaning of the paid up capital here? Clear? We have discussed 2 to 3 times regarding the paid up capital, but we are not able to understand what is the meaning of that. So now let's discuss. What is paid up capital, what is subscribed capital, and what is the authorized capital? Clear? In this, now in the upcoming 2 to 3 slides, basically we have to discuss regarding these 3 things in detail. So first one is so apart from the above, clear, whatever we have discussed, section 12.1, clear, section 12.1 of the Banking Regulation Act stipulate that the subscribed capital, that what is the subscribed capital of a banking company shall not be less than half of its authorized capital. Clear? Authorized capital, it is the highest. Okay, then after that, basically, we will subscribe capital. Clear? That the stipulate that the subscribed capital of a banking company shall not be less than half of its authorized capital. Clear? That the subscribed capital of the banking company, it is not less than half of its authorized capital. Clear? And further, the paid up capital. Clear? And further, that the paid up capital shall not be less than half of its subscribed capital. Clear? Further, the paid up capital shall not be less than half of its subscribed capital. Clear? Shall not be less than half of its subscribed capital. Clear? So please remember both these points. Clear? Please remember both these points. Clear? That is authorized capital, it is the maximum. After that, basically we have subscribed capital, and the last one basically we have paid up capital. Clear? That the subscribed capital will not less than half of its authorized capital, and the paid up capital basically shall not less than half of its subscribed capital. Clear? And if the capital is increased, clear, basically, if the capital is increased, the requirement has to be complied within a period not exceeding 2 years as allowed by the Reserve Bank. Clear? Basically, if the capital is increased, this requirement has to be complied basically within the period not exceeding 2 years as allowed by the Reserve Bank of India. Clear? As allowed by the Reserve Bank of India. Clear? So bank has to take care if there is any increase in the capital. Now let's discuss what is the meaning of the authorized capital. Clear? What is the meaning of the authorized capital? Clear? Please understand very carefully. So the authorized capital, what is that? Basically, it is the amount of capital. Clear? It is the amount of capital with which a company is registered. Clear? Basically, it is the amount of the capital with which a company is registered with the registrar of companies. Clear? Basically, the amount of capital basically with which a company is registered with the registrar of companies. That is basically known as the authorized capital. Clear? Basically, that is basically known as the authorized capital, the amount of the capital with which a company is registered basically with the registrar of companies. Clear? Registrar of company, basically, what is that? Basically, it is the body or the organization basically that is responsible for the registration of the companies. Clear? That is basically responsible for the registration of the companies. Clear? That is basically responsible for the registration of the companies. That is with the capital basically with which the company is registered with the registrar of companies. That capital basically it is known as the authorized capital. Clear? So it is the maximum capital. Clear? Basically, it is the maximum capital of company which a company can raise through its share. Clear? It is the maximum amount of the capital. Clear? That which a company basically can raise through its share. Like we can see that if a company is registered basically with 100 crore with the ROC. Clear? Registrar of company basically known as to be ROC. Clear? So this is the maximum capital. Clear? Which basically which they can raise from the market by issuing shares. By issuing shares of that much amount. Clear? Basically by issuing shares of that much amount. Clear? So it is the maximum amount of the capital basically which a company can raise through the shares. Clear? Basically through the share, that is shared capital can be maximum up to the authorized capital. Clear? Shared capital. Clear? That is basically this much is the shared capital. Clear? If they will share in, if they will issue shares, so shared capital can be maximum up to the authorized capital and not beyond that. Clear? And basically it is not beyond that. Clear? Due to this reason, companies are registered basically with such authorized capital which is well above their current needs of financing, so that if more is needed in the future, then it can easily possible. Clear? Then it can easily possible. Clear? Just you have to remember that here nothing anything other. Authorized capital just for the information purpose. Clear? That is basically with which the company is registered basically with the registrar of a companies. Now next one here basically what is the subscribed capital? Clear? From the authorized capital. Clear? Like 100 crore. They are issues. They issued 80 crore shares of amount 80 crore shares in the market. So how much is the subscription? Clear? How much is the share subscription? That is basically known as the subscribed capital. Like basically we can say that out of the 80 crore, clear, only 60 crore amount shares are subscribed. Clear? So that much it is basically known as the subscribed capital. So the amount of capital out of the authorized capital for which a company has received application. Clear? The amount of capital basically out of the authorized capital for which company has received application from the general public. Clear? Basically from the general public who are interested in buying the shares. Clear? Basically from the general public who are interested in buying the shares. Clear? So the amount of capital basically for which company has received application. Clear? That is basically we will buy this much shares. Clear? Of that company. Clear? From the general public who are interested in buying the shares. Clear? So what is subscription? Basically subscription is simply an application in which the investors expresses his interest. Clear? Basically subscription basically it is simply an application in which the investors basically expresses his interest to buy shares in the company. Clear? Subscription basically what is that? It is simply an application in which the investors basically expresses his interest to buy the shares in the company. Clear? Basically to buy the shares in the company. Clear? Usually only that much shares are subscribed which company intends to issue later. Clear? Which company intends to issue later. Okay, usually only that much shares are subscribed which company basically intends to issue later. Clear? Like we can say that. Like we can say that like basically any IPO is issued. Just for the understanding purpose. Clear? We know that basically we heard news that 20% oversubscribed, 30% oversubscribed. Clear? but the company has only 100 shares, we can say that. But we can say that we will receive applications from 120 people, clear? Basically, we will receive applications from 120 people, clear? So subscription is simply an application basically in which investor expresses his interest to buy the share in that company, clear? Usually only that much shares are subscribed, basically which company intends to issue later, clear? 120 people are interested basically for buying the shares, clear? But company will issue only 100 shares. So basically that is interest is only in that are basically only count under the subscribed capital, that is only 100 shares, clear? That is the amount of the 100 shares, clear? That is the amount of the 100 shares, clear? So please remember these things very properly, clear? Please remember these things very properly so that you are able to understand the concept properly, clear? Now last one, that is authorized capital, we have already discussed. Subscribed capital basically we have already discussed. This is thing which I have explained you in the previous session, now previous slide. But sometimes basically what will happen? Sometimes if company is in good shape, but sometimes basically if the company is in good shape, then more and more people basically will be interested in buying the shares. And in this case, basically over subscription will be the result. Like I think you are aware regarding the LIC IPO, clear? This is oversubscribed. Okay. But later on, basically, what will happen? The price of the IPO basically will continuously goes down due to some other reasons, clear? That basically which is not important at here basically for the discussion, just for the understanding purpose, clear? LIC IPO, SBI, not of SBI, sorry, clear? LIC IPO, Zomato IPO, Nike IPO, Paytm IPO. Some are successful and some are not successful, clear? Depend upon the case to case, clear? So oversubscription, that is basically more and more people basically will be interested in buying the shares. And in this case, basically oversubscription will be the result. And what is undersubscription? Basically, if a company's financial position is not sound, that is basically it is not that much strong, or due to other factors, clear? It may be possible that the subscriptions are received for lesser than the intended shares, clear? Subscriptions are received basically for the lesser amount than the intended shares, in which case there will be under subscription, clear? That will be considered as the under subscription, clear? Like we can say that basically 100 shares, here 120 people applied, here only 75 people applied. That is under subscription, that is over subscription. This one is over subscription. Okay, now move to the next one. Issued capital, clear? Basically issued capital, clear? Like we can say that basically 100 shares, 120 people are applied for the shares. Out of that, basically earlier company will interested for the 100 shares. Later on, they will issue basically of the 80 shares. That basically constitutes some capital, that is basically known as the issued capital. 80 shares, basically we can say that 80 crore, that correspond to one share is 1 crore, 80 shares, that is 80 crore, clear? So that is basically known as the issued capital, clear? That is basically known as the issued capital, clear? That is basically known as the issued capital, clear? So just for the understanding purpose, clear? So the amount of capital out of the subscribed capital, clear? Basically which has been issued by the company to the subscribers, and thus they are also known as the shareholders, clear? And thus they are also known as the shareholders. That capital basically it is known as the issued capital, clear? That capital basically it is known as the issued capital, clear? The amount of capital basically out of the subscribed capital which has been issued by the company basically to the subscribers, clear? Basically which has been issued by the company basically to its subscriber, and they are also known as the shareholders, clear? Now they are known as the shareholders. That capital basically it is known as the subscribed, sorry, that capital basically it is known as the issued capital, clear? That capital basically it is known as the issued capital. Now move to the next one, that is called up capital, clear? That is basically called up capital. Sometimes basically company will ask the shareholders, clear? Basically to give money back, clear? To give, like I will help you to understand basically with the help of this definition, called up capital, clear? In some jurisdictions, clear? Basically company is permitted to ask for only part of the total issued capital, clear? That is company will require shareholders to pay only part of the amount of the shares basically they hold, and not to pay fully, clear? And not to pay fully, clear? Like basically we can say that 20%, 30%, clear? That is basically they pay only partial, clear? In some jurisdiction, basically company is permitted to ask for only part of the total issued capital. That is, company will require shareholders to pay only part of the amount of the shares they hold and not to pay the fully, clear? So the partial amount, clear, that is that partial amount out of the issued capital, clear, the partial amount basically out of the issued capital. So asked by the company, clear, basically from the shareholders, clear, the partial amount basically out of the issued capital. So asked by the company basically from the shareholders, clear? So asked by the company basically from the shareholders out of the total value of shares, clear? Basically out of the total value of the shares, it is basically called as the, or it is basically known as the called up capital, clear? That is basically known as the called up capital, clear? That is basically known as the called up capital. Last one here, that is the paid up capital, clear? The amount of the capital basically out of the called up capital, clear? Out of the called up capital against which the company has received the payments from the shareholders so far, clear? Like we can say that basically they are expecting 60 crore and they are getting 30 crore. Clear? So the amount of the till now, just basically for the capital basically out of the called cap against which the company has received the payments, clear? From the shareholders so far, clear? Basically from the shareholders so far, that is basically known as the called up, that is basically known as the paid up capital, clear? That is basically known as the paid up capital, clear? So basically these are the different types of the capital which you have to understand, that clear? Basically which you have to understand that first one is the paid up capital, second one is the subscribed capital, third one is the issued capital, fourth one is the called up capital, fifth one is the paid up capital, clear? Fifth one is the paid up capital. Now, what is the right of the shareholder? Clear? Basically, if any person becomes shareholder. So, what is the right of that person? Clear? Shareholding in the banking companies. Clear? So, voting rights of the shareholder. Clear? Basically, will they get the voting rights? Yes, definitely. Basically, they will get the voting rights. So, there is no specific ceiling on the person's holding of shares basically in a banking company under the Banking Regulation Act or any other law. However, Section 12(2) of the Act puts certain restrictions, clear? Basically, but Section 12(2) of the Act basically puts certain restrictions on voting rights of the shareholder, clear? Basically, on the voting rights of the shareholder. So, what according to that? Basically, according to that, no shareholder can exercise voting rights in respect of the shares, clear? Basically, no shareholder can exercise voting rights, basically in respect of the shares held by him or her, clear? Basically, held by him or her in excess of 10% of the total voting rights of the all the shareholders of the banking company, clear? Accordingly, no shareholder can exercise voting rights in the respect of the shares basically held by him or her in excess of 10% of the total voting rights of all the shareholders of the banking company. Clear? What is the meaning of that? If any person is holding basically more than 10%, clear? So that person basically we can say that basically it is part of the management, clear? That person basically will become the part of the management, clear? Or we can say that the board of directors. Clear? That will take main decisions, clear? Because that person basically will become the member of the board of the directors, clear? Basically, if it has exceeding more than 10%, clear? Basically, if it has exceeding basically more than 10%, clear? That is voting rights of the shareholder, clear? Next one is the commission, brokerage or discount, clear? You will like basically commission, brokerage or discount, clear? So basically it is defined under which section? Section 13 of the Banking Regulation Act, clear? Imposes a ceiling on the commission, brokerage or discount or remuneration on the sale of the shares of the banking company, clear? Basically how much brokerage is to be given, clear? All these are to be basically restrictions, clear? As per the Section 13 of the Banking Regulation Act, and maximum, that is accordingly the payment on this account basically in any form should not exceed 2.5% of the paid up value of the share. That is basically 2.5%, clear? It should not be exceed, clear? That is basically it should not be exceed basically how much amount? That is 2.5%, clear? That is it should not exceed basically 2.5% of the paid up value of the shares, clear? Basically it should not exceed basically 2.5% of the paid up value of the shares. Okay, so please remember all these things, clear? Basically please remember all these things so that you are able to answer the question, clear? So that you are able to answer the question. Now only one point basically left for our today's session, that is dividend, clear? Basically we are receiving If we had 20 shares, we can say that. Like this year, basically, SBI offered basically, I think, 7 rupees dividend, clear, per share, clear. 7 rupees or 6.5 rupees exactly. I'm not remember. Near about that much rupees, basically, they will. So how will they will decide, clear, what is the amount of the dividend, clear, what is the amount of the dividend? Very, very important one mark question regarding that, clear. So there are also certain restrictions on the payment of the dividend to the shareholders of the banking company, clear. Basically, there are also certain restrictions basically on the payment of the dividend to the shareholders of the banking company, clear. So that's under section 15, clear. So that's under section 15 of the Banking Regulation Act. No dividend is paid, clear. Basically, no dividend is to be payable until all capitalized expenses are completely written off, clear. Basically, only after capitalized expenses basically are completely written off, only after that basically dividend is to be payable, clear. So among that, clear, what are the expenses, clear. Such expenses basically include preliminary expenses. This is basically one mark question, clear. Sometimes basically they are asking before declaring the dividend, clear. Basically, what are the expenses basically they will include, clear. So such expenses basically include, first one is the preliminary expenses, second one is the organization expenses, third one is the share selling commission, fourth one is the brokerage, fifth one is the loss incurred and any other item of expenditure basically not represented by the tangible assets, clear. So such expenses basically include preliminary expenses, organization expenses, share selling commission, brokerage, loss incurred, and any other item of expenditure not represented by the tangible assets, clear. Basically, that are not represented by the tangible assets, clear. After looking upon all these things, only dividend is to be declared, clear. After looking upon all these things, basically dividend is to be declared, clear. So in this session, basically, we have to discuss up to this much point. Just you have to remember that, like, section 15 is for dividend, section 13 is basically for the commission, brokerage, or discount, and section 12(2) basically it is regarding the voting rights of the shareholders, clear. That is basically regarding the voting rights of the shareholder. We have discussed paid up capital, called up capital, issued capital, under subscription, over subscription, subscribed capital, authorized capital, clear. So I request to all of you, please go through all these points at least 2 times so that you are able to remember all these points, clear. So thanks to all of you for joining this session. For any query doubt, you can ask your doubts in the group, clear. So thanks to all of you for joining this session.